In spring 2024, I did what I guess a lot of you watching this did as well, and I bought an IK Multimedia ToneX One. Now, I've never been personally someone who's really into modeling. I've never found modeling tones or playing feel on digital modelers to match analog amps, but the ToneX One actually convinced me straight out of the box. As soon as I plugged it in and I was using it as a setup with my guitar running into this, running into headphones, the amps in this sounded and felt pretty good. So I was convinced straight away. The first time that a modeler has made it seem right in terms of tone, but also in terms of playing feel. So high marks for the ToneX One already. But another thing that IK Multimedia have talked about a lot is the fact that you can model the drive pedal portion of your rig. Now, as someone who owns far too many analog drive pedals for myself, this was something that I had to try. And that's what this video is about, because I've picked 10 of my favorite, possibly most iconic drive pedals to share with you today, as I did some very quick A/B tests and comparisons between some free presets that I found and downloaded on the ToneNET software and the pedals themselves. Now, you've already seen the thumbnail and the title, but let me quickly share with you the 10 pedals that we're going to be shooting out against the ToneX One today. We've got the legendary Cochrane Timmy. We've got the also legendary Electro Harmonix Big Muff. This is the standard nano-sized Big Muff that they sell in 2024. We've got the ProCo Rat 2. I'm going to stop saying iconic before every pedal because these are pretty much all iconic. The ProCo Rat 2, the current mass-produced one. And I've also got a vintage-themed Rat with the Gorilla Warfare by Greer amps, and this has the legendary Rat LM308 chip in it as well, so this should be a slightly different flavor. And I found two different Rat ToneNET profiles as well, one ProCo Rat 2 and one vintage Rat, so we're going to try both of those. Then we've got my favorite high gain pedal, the Revv G3 distortion, and we've got my favorite pretty much low to medium gain transparent overdrive pedal, the Greer Lightspeed. After that, we move to some mini pedals. We've got the Ibanez Tube Screamer Mini. We've got the Wampler Germanium Tumnus, although we're just going to count this as a Klon for the purposes of this video. We've got the Nobels ODR-mini, and we've got the Fulltone OCD, but I don't own a Fulltone OCD, so I'm using the City Dry Martini, which is an OCD clone in this case. So those are the 10 pedals that we're going to be running up against the ToneX One. Like I said, I found presets for free in 10 seconds within typing in the name of each pedal in the ToneNET software, so I haven't paid any money for any of these or anything like that. This video is not sponsored in any way, shape or form either, so it's totally my opinions, totally independent thought process going on as well. And well, I'd love to hear what you guys think too. So my rig for today is going to be my Hughes & Kettner Ampman pedal amplifier, and into the front end of that we're going to be running a Boss RC10 looper and then the ToneX and the pedal concern. So that's going to be my setup. The amp is going to be set to a pretty neutral clean setting, no reverb or anything like that, so we're just going to hear how these pedals sound, and we're also going to get a chance to hear how good the ToneX One sounds as a pedal going into an amp. Does it work for that? You're about to find out. Now, some of the loops that I'm using today are going to be played on the bridge humbucker of my Epiphone Les Paul and some on the bridge single coil of my Fender Telecaster, so we've got a nice bit of a mix there too. In terms of the pedal comparisons themselves, I'm going to do a maximum of 2 minutes for each one. We'll start with the analog pedals at 12 o'clock on everything. We'll see how we can match the ToneX to that, and then I'll do maybe a favorite preset sound or two from each of the analog pedals and see how we can match that with the ToneX in terms of its gain structure, its EQ, and its tonal character. So I'm very much looking forward to this, and I hope you are too. Timestamps are down there in the description and the comments if you'd like to skip to the pedal or the gain style of your choice, but leave me your thoughts down there as well. Really like to hear what you guys think, but I'll give you my opinions and a little bit more detail about that afterwards. Okay then, so that was the ToneX One up against 10 iconic analog, overdrive, distortion and fuzz pedals. And I hope you enjoyed the tones, the tweaking and the comparisons on offer there. Leave me your thoughts and comments now, telling me what you think. Do you feel that the ToneX One matches up to these? Did you think it got close in tonal character? Did it match them in any way? Or did you think that this sounded like a pale digital imitation of the analog originals? Really love to hear what you guys think, so let me know. But now I'm going to tell you a few of my thoughts. And once again, I have to say that, well, I've been convinced yet again that the ToneX One is pretty much the real deal. Loads of these pedals sounded great right from the off. I thought a lot of them, when I turned the pedals on at 12 o'clock and then the ToneX on at 12 o'clock, it sounded almost dead on. It sounded very, very close. All of them were ballpark. I thought a couple of the pedals were slightly weaker than the others. I think, for example, the Tumnus, the Klon, didn't quite get as close as some of the others. The OCD didn't get quite as close, although that was the Dry Martini. It wasn't a real OCD, so maybe that's the reason. And I also thought that the Revv G3 had a slightly different character from the ToneX preset here, but those are things that I could probably spend a bit more time tweaking and get even closer. And I also have to buy a Fulltone OCD as well to do that again in the future. But still, very, very close on first here. And also in terms of feel, because I had to play a lot of these loops and I've been testing these with my other guitars as well, I feel that the ToneX One as a drive pedal, it feels just as good as it sounds. So hugely convincing for me. Again, full marks to IK Multimedia for this. I've become something of a modeling convert from this small pedal. And again, the idea of getting the larger ToneX box is very, very appealing at this point in time, because that would give me more options in terms of having the drive pedals in ToneX format on the floor in front of me. But just looking at some of the pedals we have here, the Big Muff, for example, I was so surprised at how close that sounded right from the off. And this is just a free ToneNET preset as well. And something like the Timmy and the Lightspeed, these low gain transparent overdrive pedals with their beautiful sparkly responses, we got ballpark with the ToneX. I don't think that the ToneX is a genuine replacement for any of these pedals. They have a different sort of liveliness to them. They have a different way of operation. Having full analog pedals, at least if you've got more than one, is a much more intuitive thing, at least for me. But we were so very close. And then I had the very interesting experience with the two different Rat pedals. I found two different ToneX Rat settings. One was for a vintage 1986 Rat, which would have had the LM308 chip in it, and the other was for a Rat 2. And I thought that they sounded very different to each other, but very close to the respective pedals again. So super impressed with the ToneX free presets that I've found so far. And presumably that's only going to get better in future. I've seen that companies like Amalgam Audio are now starting to offer their own pedal ToneX presets, so it should just get better from here on in. So fantastic in that regard. I'm a full-on convert. That said though, there are some downsides in my opinion to using the ToneX One as an effects pedal, so I'll list those for you now. The first thing, just in case it's of interest to you or if it's a deal breaker for you, is the fact that the ToneX One is not true bypass. Not a deal breaker for me, but it's something that I think you should know, and this is also not something that was made clear at all during the purchase process or anything like that. I didn't have any idea. I don't think IK Multimedia are hiding this from us. Why would they? It's a digital modeler. Why would you assume that it's going to be true bypass? But it's not, so there we go. Now in terms of downsides then, the first thing that I would want to mention is the fact that there is a certain joy, at least there is for me, in owning physical pedals. I also happen to own a lot of vinyl and stuff like that, so I'm old school in that respect. I also read printed paper guitar magazines, so it's possibly that kind of a generational thing too, but there is a joy for me of owning the physical pedals, being able to turn the knobs, and of course if you own a bunch of different drive pedals, you can stack them in different orders and stuff like that. I do think that the ToneX sounds great, by the way, stacked with the analog pedals, but you don't have the same amount of options as you do when you have your own group of analog effects pedals. So in that way, I prefer the real thing over the ToneX. What I also think is great, by the way, is supporting the real small-time builders like Paul Cochrane in this instance, like Greer Amps and so on, who are building these amazing analog circuits. Don't forget that if we all only buy ToneX and Kempers and stuff like that in the future that are just modelers, well, at some point there aren't going to be any more analog circuits for those companies to model. So let's keep supporting the old school analog builders in their endeavors just as much as we do the digital innovators, and I think we'll have a great mix going into the future. Now another thing that hasn't really convinced me yet about the smaller ToneX is the actual tweaking the pedal on the fly thing. I don't think that this pedal is really intended to be tweaked massively during a live show or anything like that. You might at most want to move between a few different presets, but if you are going to be tweaking it, well, it does take a bit of getting used to, and it's not as intuitive by far as the analog drive pedals. pedals, and that's for a few reasons. Well, it's a mini pedal in one format. There are some mini analog drive pedals as well, but we have the alt switch here that gives you access to 2 different functions per knob here. So sometimes the EQ knobs are actually gate, compression and reverb, and the volume and gain knob is also moved between by pressing this alt switch. And I did find on a few occasions that I wanted to change the gain or the volume, and I accidentally changed the other, and a couple of times I wanted to change the EQ to add a bit of treble, for example, and I found myself bringing in some extra reverb instead, which you really don't want in the heat of the moment. So with the ToneX One, really spend time building the ideal presets before you go out live on stage, and that's going to make your gigging day a lot easier. The other thing about this pedal, of course, because you've got dual functions for each of the knobs, it also means that what you see is not always what you get. For example, if I've wound the gain all the way up and then I press the alt switch, I'm back on volume, but the volume is probably not going to be full. It's probably halfway or something like that. And that means that if I then also tweak the knob, which is not in the physical setting where it currently is, well, you might get jumps in volume or gain or EQ or something like that. So again, not very intuitive, takes a bit of getting used to. And again, I would recommend programming everything as much as possible in advance before you go and play a show or anything where you're under pressure or anything like that, because it could be very annoying. And one more thing to point out was that I noticed that when you're on the gain setting on the ToneX One, when you move it all the way down to 0, well, there's no more volume. You have to have at least a bit of gain going on. This actually makes, in my opinion, finding lower gain settings and matching them with the analog pedals a bit more tricky with the ToneX One, because you have to have the gain up a bit higher and consequently the volume a bit lower, and that doesn't quite lead to intuitive tonal comparing. What I also found is that the ToneX One seems to have a bit less headroom than some of the other pedals, and in particular the Wampler Tumnus. Now I know that Wampler pedals are kind of well known for having an extra large amount of clean headroom, but I just found that I couldn't match it with the ToneX, especially when the gain was down low. There just wasn't enough volume on tap for me to really match the output of the Tumnus. But again, this is possibly something that could be done differently. You could possibly model the Tumnus with a higher amount of clean headroom and put that into the ToneX, and maybe that would work. This is far outside my expertise level, but I'm just thinking out loud here. So overall, while I personally still favor the analog drive pedals, and while I would rather have a board with 3 or 4 of those than 1 or 2 of these, boy does this thing get close. Just like with the amp sounds, the pedal sounds on this thing are really, really good. And not just the sounds, the feel too. They really match the analog pedals there. And in terms of the tones here, like I said, we got ballpark straight away, and with some judicious tweaking, I think we could get this thing sounding even closer. So there are so many ways that you could use this pedal, and I'm just thinking about the price of this thing, about 200 bucks or 200 euros, versus the price of some of these pedals. In fact, if I look down at those 10 pedals on the table in front of me, they probably cost about $1,500 in total. So this is ridiculously affordable in comparison. I don't think that the ToneX One should replace your favorite drive pedals. I still think for many reasons you should go out and buy the real deal if you can. But if you don't have the means, or if you want to test out different tonal worlds before buying, this is a great option. And another way I think it could be cool is if you have the odd kind of specialist pedal that you might only otherwise use for one song. Let's say you have a vintage fuzz face or something which you don't really want to put on your board because it doesn't like your modern power supply and it doesn't play well with your other pedals. Well, if you've got a ToneX model which is ballpark, you can use that instead and no problems whatsoever. In the same way, if you might be using something like a Revv G3 just for one song or for part of a cover set or something like that, but you don't want that pedal on your board because you don't really need it, well, again, you've got the option to have a preset in here that's going to get you ballpark, and in a live context, I don't think anybody else, especially the punters out there, are going to know the difference. Overall then, I'm super impressed with the ToneX One as a drive pedal. It's really, really decent, and I'm really happy that I chose to buy this thing with my own money. More experiments with the ToneX One to come in future. Let me know what you thought about the pedals here. Tell me what else you'd like me to do with the ToneX One, and there will be more videos to come. If you're still around, would make my day if you wanted to like the video or maybe even subscribe to my little channel, because that really does help. But that's been it for today's video. I've been Rich, this has been the ToneX One, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.